die and someone picks up the work that I created in the world, I don't want them to guess what realizations I had after the non-dual realizations, because there are other insights and realizations that unfold after awakening to the non-dual, and there have been many actually. And if you watch my Facebook Live or YouTube video, you're going to get a lot of them. But here's one in particular that I'm going to narrow down on, which is for me by far the biggest, most important realization or insight. And that is the direct connection between, in most cases of chronic pain, and your emotional life, your current emotional life. And what I want to show you is that chronic pain became my friend. What I mean by that, I learned how to trust that to show me exactly what I need to look at. And it was like the perfect teacher. I mean, literally perfect. It never got it wrong. And there is a deeper reason. There is another reason that we have this chronic pain. It's not what it appears. It's not just this thing that's happening to us that has no utility. It does have utility. I don't think we understand it completely yet. I don't think science understands it yet, but I've seen a direct utility or benefit in having my chronic pain, which I want to explain to you. And it would directly affected and improved and harmonized some of my relationships. And without the pain, I don't know that that ever would have happened. Stick with me. So, all I want you to think about as you're listening is this in your own body, as you're listening to me, that area that might feel tight or contracted or painful and persistently so, that's what I'm referring to. Unless that is a physical thing, which in my experience, most of them are not, then that can be your best friend. That can literally be the thing that not only wakes you up, but allows you to embody the awareness. Follow me for a second. This is pretty detailed for you to understand what happened and how this insight came about. But you have to look at all the circumstances around this to see it. I would never have discovered this, I don't think. I don't think I would have discovered this without these circumstances in place. So it's like a gift that came into my life. I started to experience the chronic nerve pain that I've shared about, about a year. It started to really amp up less than a year before I met my new husband, Chester. Chester is my current husband. I had not met him yet, and the physical pain started to amp up. And I got a sense that it was about some unresolved trauma from childhood, and didn't know that it was about anger repression, but I soon learned. Chester came into my life. Chester and I strongly connected. It's one of those situations where when two people meet each other, it's like, you know, that this is a relationship that's going to happen. Like it's unmistakable. And that's the kind of relationship that we have had ever since, like this. And I do believe that he's here to help me, and I'm here to help him. And for me, the way he helps me and has helped me is to more deeply embody this. And let me show you how it happened through seeing the relationship between love and pain. My pain became the way that would point me in the direction of what was happening in my relationship with him and with others. It would literally point me there, and it would help clear up the issue. And as soon as it would clear up the issue, the pain would just come down. And over time, the pain kept coming down and down and down. As I cleaned up those issues that were remaining, there's just no pain signal. That's important for all of you out there who think you have something physical, or maybe you know better now that it's not entirely physical. When I believed my chronic pain was physical, I did not make any connections between the pain and my actual relationships in life, because I was conditioned, like many of us, to believe that a chronic pain is, in fact, physical. Now, I'd heard and been involved with the teachings that say that physical things have emotional roots. But I wasn't completely sold on that because I didn't see any really good science around it. And science does have it's a helping hand here when it studies things. We don't have to rely on it completely, but it's helpful. And it hasn't been there, or I didn't know that it was there. Now I know that there's science to this. And if you haven't figured that out, go to my Facebook page. There's a lot of science on this in the sense that many cases of chronic pain are not, in fact, physical. The science is popping up everywhere saying it's connected to trauma, unresolved or repressed anger, fear. It's exactly what I'm seeing in sessions, and it's exactly what I saw in my own experience. But here's how the insight came about. Again, the chronic pain, after 20 years of being very mild, it started to amp up a few years ago to a very intense level. And then I met Chester and did not make those connections. It just seemed like, oh, I'm having this relationship, which is independent of this pain is happening. And I don't think they're independent at all. That's just how life is. Does it? It gives you the experiences, if you're awake to them, that you need to fully awaken and embody. It's always giving us these experiences. And at first, I couldn't see all the ways life was giving me this gift with this relationship with Chester. But lo and behold, the pain started to really amp up and remain amped up during the first 2 years, 3 years really, of our relationship. Now, what would happen would be is that the pain would sort of flare up, and I would do at first, what a lot of people do. I would treat it as a body issue. So treating it and divorcing it, or not even making the connection between what's happening in my life, in my relational dynamics of my life, and the pain. No connection yet. So I think a lot of people are like this. They're treating their pain as if it's completely disconnected from their relationships and their emotional life. Even if you buy into the science, let me say this, even if you don't buy into some of the new science that's saying these chronic pain signals are actually created by um, emotional stuff, that you still have to buy into the basic science that's been around for a long time, which is stress exacerbates physical pain. There's no way around the emotional element to this. Whether you can, even if you don't believe in the new studies, which I don't see why you wouldn't, because they're out there, that are saying emotional repression and emotions are very much involved in the actual pain signal itself, not just making it worse. So you might want to pay attention to that because that's an interesting development that's going on while I'm talking about this and others are. Keeping that in mind, in my day to day life, I wasn't, because of being conditioned by Western medicine here in the States and by our culture, which essentially says that if something's going on down here, it's a body thing, it's physical. So Western medicine or something that addresses it as a physical issue is the answer. And in having that kind of belief system, you further disconnect from making the insight, the literal connection between your pain and what's going on in your life, your relational dynamics, that aspect of your life, the social, relational, emotional realm of your life. So we all start off at a disadvantage in this for those of us who've been conditioned to believe the mind body separation still. I didn't even realize I had that belief still because with the non dual realization, it was so clear that there isn't anything that's separate, that so clear. And yet, this was just a belief system that had been given to me over and over every day when I was a kid. And so it was just back here running the show. And it's very, very unhelpful because during that whole time, I was again treating my physical pain like, oh, I need some resource, internal or external, to relieve this physical issue. This doesn't have anything to do with why I'm disconnected from Chester in this moment or the pattern of disconnection. Like, wasn't making the connection. And once I started to make the connection, I thought it was just a matter of just a little stress happening. And so, just as you deal with the stress, the pain gets managed. What I found is that this is actually a doorway right here into a deeper embodiment. Is once I started to connect the pain with my emotional, relational, social dynamic of my life, the healing began. Let me take you down to the nitty gritty of this. Literally, I would be. Why am I saying literally all the time? Is because I watched Paris Hilton the other day, Cooking with Paris Hilton, and she says literally all the time. So I have to stop taking my vocabulary from Paris Hilton. Sorry, Paris. Um, so it was a beautiful discovery, and literally a beautiful discovery to see this happening in my life, where I come to this despite the world telling us that the mind and body is split, or that pain has nothing to do with all this stuff. I saw it directly that it does. So here's what I mean. Like, there are unconscious patterns in us in relationship, and they're unconscious. So we don't see them. And there were patterns in me. See, Chester came into my life and he was a different kind of person. Like, he is the kind of person that if there's anything in me that needs to be awoken, he would be able to do it because of the way that we interact. There's a lot of like brutal honesty. Like, we don't hold back and we don't filter. We know everything about each other, literally everything. There isn't anything that we don't share that either one of us can think. When you have that kind of relationship, it is, if you've never had that before, it can bring up your stuff. Doesn't matter how awake you are at all. It will bring up whatever stuff you need to see. And it did, but I didn't make the connection at first. So there would be times when I, for example, would be lying in bed, and what I would feel is just a disconnection from between us. And if you know Chester, I mean, he likes to do different things. Like, he's a 7 on the Enneagram. So he likes to do different things. And so there a bit of it was actually factual in the sense that in doing all those different things, it does affect the connection in relationships. But the question that arose in me is, why is it bothering me so much? And I didn't really realize it was until I tuned into my body much more, and specifically this area of pain. And I would start to notice in those moments when I felt that disconnection with him, the pain would be more activated. That was interesting to discover, and I'm sure many people already know this, and we talk about this. Actually, this is not anything particularly new, this part, because I think most people intuit that at the very least, the painful areas of their bodies flare up when there's some sort of stress. But what I saw is that it's more than stress, it's actually beliefs that are still hovering in our experience that we don't even know. I didn't know that I had. And this is very humbling to admit, because it's like, how could I not see an unconscious pattern? It doesn't even matter. It wasn't seen. This feeling of disconnection, and for example, how it was connected to my spine, and it went very, very deep. It wasn't, when people say stress affects pain, I'm thinking that's just doesn't cut it for me. Because when you go into inquiry, you see the word stress doesn't fit what we're talking about here. These are paradigms. This is full programming of humans at believing things. And yes, that's stressful. But this is more than about just reducing stress around pain. That's just the beginning. This is about healing, embodying this, awakening it to a way that you allow your body to literally unfold the embodiment, the whole process. Your body is taking over. And that's what it did. It took over. I just remember being in bed one night and it's like, oh, the pain really hurts tonight. And I feel disconnected from him. And immediately I started looking and I saw, now you're not going to have this particularly, but let me explain this. A big part of my disconnection from Chester had to do with what came up as, before I met Chester, a past life figure. Now, don't let that scare you. Or don't think that Scott has went off the rocker. I would not share this if it weren't directly relevant to this work. It's so relevant. It doesn't matter whether it was a past life thing or a this life thing, the information and the insight would be still the same. Now, let me back up. Before I met Chester, remember, I was already having this physical pain. And in inquiry, I was discovering this past life figure named Mary. Now, Mary was very angry in her life. I didn't recognize Mary. It's like she had her own life, she had her own relationships. She hated men. And her man, the one that she loved, was the kind of man that would just go out and be with a bunch of different women, leaving her feeling very, very angry at him and all men. And when I say anger, I mean like red kind of anger, like not repressed kind of anger, like right on your sleeve anger. And that's who she was in her life. A very angry woman, but at the very core, I mean, these are all things that were just revealed in my consciousness. At the very core, she felt unwanted. From that feeling of unwanted came the hatred, the rage at men. Now, again, don't let the past life thing make you say Scott's in woo woo land. Listen to the insight here, not that part of it. The insight was that this aspect of consciousness for me was coming up so that I could integrate something. And as I've shared before, what needed to be integrated partly was the anger that I had repressed in this lifetime. So Mary, it doesn't matter whether she's really from a past life, is what I saw, because the point is to integrate that. Anger had not been integrated, it had been repressed in me. Mary was a very helpful figure in my consciousness to help integrate this. It's all very strange when you think of it that way. But what I'm saying is I don't know that she's past life. The point is she showed up as past life. Doesn't mean that she was. Could have just been an aspect of our consciousness that just holds a repression for us. But she's very important in this. So there was a certain point in time where Mary got integrated, meaning I saw her image come up and I just mined out the meaning of her image. I kept saying, what does this image of Mary mean about me? What does it mean? I'm unwanted. I'm angry. I hate men. I hate him, meaning her husband. Those kinds of thoughts. So I just witnessed them as if I'm Mary. And witnessing and witnessing and witnessing them, Mary's image eventually stopped appearing that way in inquiry. And soon after that, through my own set of inquiries, the anger repression came up. This is an important piece of it. So anger came up. But when anger came up, it didn't always just come up cleanly or freely. There would be times when it would just kind of get hooked. So emotion would get hooked, and it wouldn't actually be released from the pain. So the pain itself would flare up, holding apparently this unresolved emotion that was starting to come to the surface because of doing inquiry, but still remained hidden, and the connection wasn't fully made between how this pain was being experienced and what was going on in my relationship. So back to lying in bed, and during those nights, I just started to see this is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that I feel this pain right now more than ever, and that there's this perceived disconnection between me and Chester. So what I would do is I would just like make friends with this pain and just begin to have it show me exactly what it's here to show me, like finally open up to it instead of treating it like this independent thing that has to be treated separately from my relational life. What if it's actually an integral part? What if it is my relational life? Maybe that would be the way to look at it. Maybe this is a indicator of exactly what needs to be embodied here. So I just used it. I felt into it during those nights lying in bed. And a lot of what came up was just Mary's stuff. But yet it's my stuff because it's happening in my life. But it felt almost like it was from a different lifetime. I mean, I don't have the experience of being with men who cheat like that. I don't have that experience at all in this lifetime. And yet that was her experience. So a lot of the things that happened felt like it came from her, but I don't know what that means. Just following an inquiry where it goes. And by using the pain and feeling into it, I would just go right into direct inquiry like this. So, because I'm inquiring really from her perspective. And so I would go into Chester wants me. He wants me more than he wants other people or other things, because that would be the kind of inquiry to get at Mary's suffering, which was apparently now my suffering, but hidden in my chronic pain. So, using that inquiry, I could sense the objections, and it's like they felt so old. I can't tell you how old, and how I knew they were old is because these words would come up and they were like synonymous with, embedded with very painful sensations. It's almost like the sensation itself, or the word itself, the words were the sensation. So I can see why people don't heal on that level, because these are really stubborn thoughts that would come through because they were so strongly velcroed to that pain. And if you don't have that cultivation of awareness, you don't have that curiosity, you might never discover this on your own. You might continue treating it as like physical pain. Meanwhile, your relationship has all these issues like I did. But I didn't. I trusted the body. I started trusting the body and I went into inquiry like this. So Chester wants me more than he wants other things and other people. No. And again, it didn't even feel like mine, but here it was. And I would stay with it. And I would go into all other angles of inquiry that were showing up. So I would make the connection between my pain and this disconnection in relationship, that they essentially were the same thing, that one begat the other, or vice versa. They're no longer inseparable, or they're no longer separable in my experience. And then literally seeing as I went into the right inquiries about what was really behind the disconnection, pain relief, but more than that, over time, a healing. Because when you start looking at the actual programs and beliefs and traumas associated with an area, to the extent that that's creating the pain, it doesn't anymore. And what I found out is that most, if not all, of the pain signal was these unseen areas in my relationship in my life. So the insight is that the connection between love and pain, or pain and relationship. Never again will I think that pain has nothing to do with what's going on in my relationships. Here's the thing, even as I inquired into Chester, it was more than about just current stress. Like I think some research tends to indicate, or the old research tends to indicate, that it's just kind of current stress. Like someone's doing something or there's a challenging situation going on and that creates, uh, it's much deeper than that. What we're calling stress there is actually paradigms, belief systems, programs, traumas, deficiency stories that are still believed and that are connected to that, and that are very difficult to discover if you're treating it as a physical thing. Very difficult because you wouldn't even necessarily look for that. Like I didn't look for it. After having those insights, the very direct connection between my physical pain and my emotional, relational life, that I never then I mean, maybe a couple of times I fell prey to the idea that they weren't connected, but mostly after that, I began to use my pain as like a best friend, someone who would actually tell me the truth. Whereas the reality might not show it to you. People might not say it to you, but your pain will tell you directly what's going on if you listen. It won't lie. Even doctors lie. They don't know they're doing it. But if they don't know that it's emotional, they're going to tell you that it's physical. And if it's emotional, you can't trust that. But you can trust this, this pain, and open to it. I have such compassion for people who haven't discovered this yet because I was one of those folks who had not discovered this insight. And so you're at the mercy of your physical pain. When I know what that feels like. I mean, I was even suicidal at a certain point, and I work with people who experience that. When you're treating pain as this physical thing that's disconnected from your emotional, mental, relational, social life, it's a very narrow kind of world. It's like the only options are what kind of thing can I stick in there or swallow or use or do that treats it as a physical thing. And that kind of mentality shuts out the emotional life completely. See that division between mind and body there is so strong for some people. Now, some people who have pain, they don't treat it as a physical thing. Some of you out there have seen the connection already. But what I feel like we can do here with KI, Killer Bee Inquiries, is go deeper into experiential work that actually helps you let the pain be a guide in your transformation, literally be your best friend in a way. So I started to welcome those moments, even though they were painful, when the pain would flare up, because they were telling me something that I couldn't otherwise see. And that's why I think these chronic pain and these contractions can become our best friend. Because what I discovered in inquiry is that when you go into feeling into that and using really skillful inquiry, um, you start to see those connections. It's unmistakable, the connections between the physicality of that and the emotional or the mental, relational. And it was only when I broke free of that very limiting viewpoint that this is physical, that the healing would start. It just didn't happen until then. But what I'm saying is this is more than about healing pain. As if that's enough, right? If the pain can heal, great. That's it. That's all I need. There's more. This pain is what helps to heal relationships around us, to heal or to awaken within them if we use this as our guide. I know that there are people listening saying, I don't know, Scott. I'm saying I know you don't, because I didn't either. Don't trust me. But learn how to inquire with this painful area or this contraction that you have. Learn the Killer Bee inquiries and you'll see it. One of the things you can start with is just by feeling into the area that's contracted or painful and just say, who or what is this about? And quietly listen from awareness. So when I would do things like that, I don't know what comes up for you, but if anything comes up, a who or a what, that's content that's relevant. Don't turn away from that. Go into that. So for me, sitting in bed, what would happen was, who or what is this about? Sometimes when I first ask that, I'd be like, well, I don't know what it's about. But Chester's and I are disconnected. It's almost like that's coincidental until I made the direct connection. Oh, that's what it's about. So that's turning towards inquiry and then finding or discovering the belief system, the story that's operating right then. It's the good old boomerang. This one way, feeling into that area, looking at the person that you're having some issue with, and what deficiency story does that mirror back? That's how I first discovered I'm unwanted. Now, I'm unwanted has never been a story of mine. I don't think I've ever really felt that, but Mary felt that. So perhaps that was simply unconscious in me, is what I'm saying. Of course, that's been part of my experience because it was coming up in inquiry, but it felt like it wasn't mine at first because it had been apparently repressed and tucked away, associated with what felt like a physical pain. So, in naming that I'm unwanted, I could go into inquiry looking at Chester and saying, I am wanted, or he wants me more than he wants other things and people. And then here comes this old stuff. No, no, versions of no. And I would just stay with them. And these, again, these are powerful thoughts at this level. I can see why people don't heal out of this because the thought is so strong that, and it's, for me, it was coming from trauma, if not my own trauma, somehow repressed Mary's trauma, the trauma of being in a relationship where you constantly being hurt, constantly angry, she was. So when it's associated with trauma, we already know from science and our own experience that trauma is repressed in many cases. Like we're not able to always access that, but we're starting to be able to through this work is recognizing when you feel something and you go into inquiry, there's your trauma coming up, asking the right questions. For me, the right questions were who or what is this about? Chester. Okay, now what am I believing? I'm unwanted? Even if it doesn't feel like mine, that's what apparently he's believing because the thought is so strong, connected to the pain. So, turning towards those thoughts from awareness, I can see why people bounce out of that. Because again, the thoughts are so strong that, and it's a lifetime of turning away from them and keeping them unconscious. So it's sort of like coming back to be with them fully, each one, as ugly or as painful as it might have been, or uncomfortable staying with each one, and then watching each one just fall away. And every time it did, it's like the pain would just get better. It's like it's responding. It's like you're finally paying attention to the issue that I'm here to tell you about. It rewards. It's like, okay, now you're treating me to what you're actually listening to me, what I'm trying to tell you, pain, so to speak. And it's such a perfect recipe because it, when something doesn't work, it'll show you that too. So during the times I was treating it as a physical thing, it would give me a little bit of relief, but it's almost like it was saying, you're not on the right topic here. You've got this wrong. And then as soon as I made the connection to my relationship, it started to respond and I got relief. It's almost like it's rewarding you. Finally, you're paying attention to this. And in paying attention to this, just chunks of the pain would fall away. This is an insight that we have known and shared about for 15 years, which is to trust our emotional body to take us into inquiry, like trusting your body. But the point is that some of this is repressed and unconscious and comes up as more like pain or contraction. And that's where the disconnect is for certain people. They'll categorize it as somehow not connected to all that stuff, right? But the insight that we had earlier was again with the primary emotions or the emotions that would actually show themselves in your daily life. So, for example, if anger is not repressed and you get angry in your life, but you feel it in your body and you don't know what the story is, we've always said, come down and feel that and just allow it first. And if it feels stuck, start discovering what the story is with it. One of the ways is like, what does this anger mean about me? Or what am I believing? And then witnessing what comes up. So that's trusting your body on just what I call everyday emotions. So you're sad, but you don't quite know why because it's not quite in your consciousness. You're not aware of it. feeling into it and going into inquiry. Like, for example, I'm not sad is an inquiry that might provoke the thoughts of your sadness so you can see them, see the content, and also see that it's not you. Welcome each one. So that's always been the case. Trust the body. And frankly, even a few years ago, I was saying trust the body on contractions because contractions are there to show us, but I had no idea of how correct that was. Because it also applies to many cases of chronic pain. That's what I didn't know. This is really good news for all of us because, again, I work with people every day who aren't making this connection, and I see them doing what I was doing. And maybe some of them have a physical thing, but after reading the science in John Sarno, my guess is many of them have the same issue that I had. With a lot of compassion for that mindset that can feel like being in a hole where the body is contracted or the system, there's emotional congestion, chronic pain, very persistent, and someone doesn't make the connection between that and something very deeply unresolved in their life. And then from that, the things that they do and the frustration that they experience and not getting real relief from it. In a very basic sense, these areas are, if you'll use the right inquiry, they will show you the thoughts that you can't see. Go there first, witness those thoughts. So I guess I want to leave with this. If you want to come into this kind of scene, make friends with this chronic pain or this contraction, and whenever it's flaring up, more painful, tighter, stop and look around, get to a quiet place, and pull up important people in your current life and feel into that area and just ask, what am I believing? Or what or who is this about? Follow that. So you have all these people up here. Your body, if you'll trust it, the pain will feel like it's connected to somebody or something. Let everybody else go away. Work with this person. Here's the relationship that your pain or your contraction is trying to get you to pay attention to. Something here isn't resolved. This person is your teacher. This pain is your teacher. It's all there for you. But getting into inquiry is the tricky part for people. And what I said is that some folks will do what I would say is less than skillful in the sense they'll feel into the pain and they'll just see what comes up, like be with what is kind of thing. For me, that's a good start. But because of repression, things will hide by their very nature. They're repressed and unconscious. So if you think that things are just going to show themselves to you, all of it, by just being in awareness, you're not understanding what repression is quite yet. Like it's literally repressed. The system is designed to not show it to you. So if you're resting in awareness, why would you assume that just resting in awareness gets at repression? If you're still in chronic pain, if you have a persistent contraction that seems to not move that much, very persistent, chances are you're doing that, resting with what is, and the repression is remaining. But inquiry can bring it up. Inquiry can probe into those areas that don't want to come up. They want to remain unconscious to protect you. I saw this directly in my experience when I would feel that disconnection with Chester, when the pain was flaring up. I would go into utility inquiry because the thought he wants other, and by the way, Chester is one of the most loyal people. This I don't in my conscious life I have no reason to think he would ever cheat on me, so I didn't feel like mine. But in this thought was so strong, like I'm not wanted by him. Again, it didn't even feel like mine. but I'm not wanted by him would come up. I kind of lost my thought there for a second. Give me a second. Hmm, I lost it. Let me just come back to this. If you can just shore up that connection now in your life, pay attention. That's all I'm saying. Pay attention. When the pain or the contractions flared up, it's an opportunity. But if you're the kind of person who treats it as a thing that isn't emotional and mental, you might just miss the opportunity. Okay, bring those people up. Here's what I was going to say. Just came back to me. The strong thought, I'm unwanted, or he, whatever, is doing whatever, that thought was very strong. And when I saw that, the strength of that thought, it immediately took me into utility inquiry because I've learned that these strong thoughts or beliefs, we get something out of it. So I knew that there's something I was getting out of it, so to speak. So I asked, what do I get out of believing that he wants other people and things more than me? And what came up as an even stronger thought was, I have to stay safe by not getting close. It was a utility. I stay safe by not getting close. That explained the disconnection. So I just rested with that, bringing that up over and over again. I stay safe by not getting close. It would be like a very powerful thought, and I would just rest with it all the way until it would relax. Bring it back several times with the utility. That's another reason where I think people don't go deep is because they might encounter a thought at first, like that is very strong and so persistent that they begin turning away from it. Again, repression. So here with this thought, I stay safe by not getting close. Or excuse me, the first thought that says he doesn't want me or whatever, that kind of thought can be so strong that you can't even move through it. It's just there and it's like you just totally believed and you keep wincing away, turning away from it, which gives it power. And then you don't see the utility. And in not seeing the utility, it keeps its strength. So seeing the utility, what do I get out of believing that? Lets the utility come up so you can see that. And that can take you deeper into inquiry. And if you don't see the utility, sometimes you can't go deeper. See that? Because there's a benefit to our stories. They're not happening in a vacuum. We're getting something from it. So here's how it ties in. And so this is why it's more than about stress science. This is about what we believe. This is about our trauma. Even the current relationship with Chester could be connected to previous traumas, even in this lifetime. If you've heard me before, you know that when I was bullied, there was a very strong story that I can't trust people. I don't feel safe. Bullies made me kind of feel that or believe that. I don't feel safe and I have to protect myself. So you can see that earlier in my life, that story got believed, held very unconsciously. And by going into inquiry around Chester, that stuff would start coming up. The bullying would come up, and I would see because my bullies were my best friend group. These were my circle of friends, and they bullied me for what they perceived as being gay. And I was. I didn't really fully know it, but they could sense it. So these were my best friends turning around. So people close to me, feeling disconnected, making fun of me, making me feel like I'm not safe. I can't get close to them. If I get close to them, they'll attack me. That was not, I did not make the connection with my pain until I saw what was going on in my current relationship with Chester. And then naturally, what came up was the connection to the past. So, what a beautiful opportunity to see it now in my lifetime that it was pertinent to me, not just Mary. And then from there, seeing the bullies and going through the same thing like, they want me? No, they don't. They really don't. And it's not safe. And the way that I'm going to stay safe by not getting close to them. And that's exactly what I did. Even though this was my close friend group, once the bullying happened, I silently bullied them for years and didn't speak to them because of a belief that I can't get close. I have to stay safe. So fast forward, Chester, someone close to me, same story operating, but deeply unconscious, repressed, because that's how trauma is. With trauma, we repress these things, so we have to unearth them. See, otherwise we just stay in pain and stay contracted. So if there's one takeaway here, even if you don't have the skill yet, because I didn't either, I didn't have these skills at first, but they're available now. Now, all what I would say if you're interested in this, start doing a little journaling, um, or just writing things out. When your pain flares up or your contraction feels active, start writing down who or what it seems about, and just start writing some things like, what am I believing right now? What's going on in my current relationships? And what are the stories, the deficiency stories, or the other stories that are believed? Just kind of write some things out just to make at first the connection between I'm feeling something that is a contraction of the pain, and this is also going on simultaneously. And that's deceptive because this that's going on simultaneously is connected to the past and maybe even a past life thing. Not suggesting that it is, but it can be for people. All you have to do now is just make the connection because once you write it out or just make the note of it, you can't unsee it then. So that when flare-ups happen, you start to break through the idea that this is just something physical or whatever. Once you've journaled that out, it's like taking you right into the content that you need to see and just illuminating that as a start to break down the belief, if it's still there in you, that this has nothing to do with your relationships, your relational life. While writing it down, you're going to see opportunities for inquiry. So let's say you have a flare up of a stomach contraction, and then there's just, you write down, my dad was never there for me. He just wasn't connected. Write that down and don't assume that's a coincidence. Go into inquiry around that, feeling into the area. See, that's in pain. The relationship between love and pain. That's what I'm talking about. It's beautiful to see how they are so inseparably connected because this provides a way into healing right here. This is what I'm saying. As before, it felt like maybe these things are not connected, but one is actually informing the other. In other words, when things were clear with me and Chester, when I wasn't running any of these things, guess what? Pain very low, right? So you can trust it completely. Come to my weekly, for now, this may not last forever, but every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific time, I'm holding an interactive meeting with people who are coming to these same insights and want to go deeper with the Killaby inquiries on this stuff. So right now, this weekly meeting is limited to people who are doing Killaby inquiries on emotional congestion in the body, unresolved trauma in the body, emotional repression, physical chronic pain. Those folks come to the meeting. If anything that I've said here sparks your interest, let's go deeper. Thanks, everybody.